In the Bible, we have the term the Nazarites. Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah, Isa alayhi salam, is often associated with words connected to the Nazarites. Who are the Nazarites? People often think about Nazareth and the Nazarenes, but it is related, from my understanding, to the Nazarites. The Nazarites are famous for taking vows. Back into ancient times, they would take a vow, sometimes like Samuel, Prophet Samuel, his mother dedicates him to God from before birth. And so he's dedicated, his entire life, he's dedicated to God. So the Nazarites grow their hair out long, and they also are not allowed to touch dead bodies. So they grow their hair out. So Samuel is a Nazarite, so is Samson from the Bible, the strong man. He grows 7 dreadlocks, 7 matted locks. So originally, many of the Nazarites, when they're lifelong Nazarites, they would grow dreadlocks. And this would have continued on. People could be Nazarites for entire life or for a period of a vow, a certain segment of their life. This is similar to the way that the Theravada Buddhists can go in and out of monastic life. They could spend 3 months in learning about being a monk and then leave and become a householder for 10 years and then go back in for a few months during the rain retreats and then return. So they could go back and forth between householder life and monastic life. I would posit that the Nazarites had something similar and that they could go in and out of it to some extent. We see an association with Nebi Yeshua, with the Messiah, and his mother is dedicated to God as well in many traditions. And so I would argue that his family, perhaps even John the Baptist, it sounds like he was a Nazarite. So we see a tendency toward this Nazarite way of living. Perhaps they had dreadlocks, or at least for parts of their lives, or wore their hair naturally, of course. Another important thing, they didn't touch dead bodies. That would include the dead bodies of animals. They most likely would have been vegetarian. There's a lot of indication of Yahya alayhi salam, of John the Baptist, being vegetarian. The early followers of John the Baptist were vegetarian. We see indications of this among the baptizer sect that was living in Iraq until the Iraq War, and then many of them have relocated to Canada and other areas. But many of them had been vegetarian originally. A lot of the original followers of Jesus were vegetarian, the Ebionites. We know that there were widespread movements of vegetarianism and natural living, and back to the garden movements, going back to Nebi Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that were vegetarian or herbivore for periods of their life, perhaps their entire lives. Prophet Ezekiel. I think that these were back to the garden movements, attempting to return to the way of life of Adam and Eve and all the people up to Noah that were seeking to live righteously, that were herbivores. Part of the reason the world was flooded was because of meat eating and blood drinking, including cannibalism and vampirism. But the Nazarites did not eat animal flesh. And so they were, this is my understanding of this. I believe that we have been lied to about a tremendous amount of scripture and human history. And there were movements of herbivores since ancient times, and people wore their hair naturally. People harmonized with nature and sought to return back to garden and leave civilized living or city living behind and live an organic, natural, harmonious way of life in harmony with natural law, which is God's actual factual law. It's Allah's natural law that's thread through the universe. And if we read the outer signs and the inner signs, then we can actually harmonize with this and maintain a natural, true, godly way of living, a righteous way of living, where we do not need priests, we do not need scribes, we do not need Pharisees, we do not need Talmudic ways of living. So anyway, let's just go ahead and consider that there was a natural way of life that was vegetarian and that was natural in hairstyle, and that connected to the family of Isa alayhi salam, and went back to Nebi Daniel and Ezekiel and Nebi Noah up until the flood, when meat eating was allowed in certain constraints. So this is something to consider moving forward. So let's think about it. I would love to hear your opinions and your thoughts and your research and findings in the comments below.